unfortunately, and Senator Flynn mentioned it, we know that Ireland's the country with the lowest employment rate of people with disabilities in the EU, and that is a disgrace, and it's essential that we address that situation by removing barriers and ensuring that people, especially young people, can develop their skills and confidence to gain meaningful employment and independent living. To help us make recommendations, I suppose we need to understand all of the issues involved, and I think this session has been really helpful. As a farmer and as somebody who grew up on a farm and worked for a long time in disability support services, I'm particularly delighted to hear from social farming today. Agriculture, I think, can be an incredibly rewarding and empowering career if people are supported to get involved in that. So I have a few questions, and I'm going to start with the Central Remedial Clinic. So Dante, you spoke about the challenges just in finding work and the recruitment process. So could you discuss the idea of a campaign to change the way that employers think about people with disabilities? And Stephen, you talked about your experience on a CE scheme and how that wasn't beneficial, and it's such a pity to hear that. I know that CE schemes can be really positive for people, but without going into specifics, I'd love to hear from you if you had suggestions on improvements that could be made to the scheme. And Willem, perhaps you could share your insights into CE schemes with us as well if there's time. And you raised a number of changes and measures that can help increase participation of people with disabilities in employment. I'm wondering, are there any other changes and concrete measures that you think we as a committee should know about? And then for questions for social farming, you've explained about how social farming helps people kind of be active, independent, valuable and visible. I just wonder if you could give us more of a sense of the importance of this as a kind of empowering process for the participants, but also as a learning opportunity for the wider community. And James, thanks for sharing your experiences of working on a farm. I'm just wondering if you could tell us about how that worked, like a bit more about how the work helped you feel more confident and to learn new skills. And then social farming also highlighted the importance of personalised budgets as a tool that allows people to make their own choices supported by their own budget. So I'm just wondering if we could elaborate a bit on the importance of those personalised budgets, how they facilitate more equitable and accessible approach in social farming. And I think that that point that Senator Flynn was making is actually that same point. It's the financial independence, and I think we're all working towards the same thing. And it's really good as well for, like Senator Flynn's points, I think important for all of us to challenge ourselves, and particularly actually us as a committee, to challenge potentially an ableist view or culture or whatever, because as a committee focused on the rights of people with disabilities and the ratification of the UN CRPD, as far as we're aware, no members of the committee have a disability ourselves. So it's really important that we as a committee challenge ourselves with those views. And I think the point that's being made there is something that Stephen and Anthony have touched on, and Deputy Pat Buckley as well. It's that, like, in terms of, you know, a rights-based approach, people have the right to employment and they have the right to financial independence. That isn't up to organisations like Social Farming or, for example, Down Syndrome Ireland or anybody else. That's up to the state to ensure that people can actually exercise their rights that they should have under the UN CRPD, and that they would have if we would ratify the optional protocol. The right to employment or to live independently, to financial independence. It's been highlighted kind of, I think, in an inadvertent way that that's something that we need to push for more. People should have that, and at present they don't. We talk, you know, like I said, Stephen and Anthony touched on it. When you try and seek more employment or more financial independence, then your payments are cut. That's the thing that really needs to be addressed to ensure people's right to financial independence and employment. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So we will go to Stephen, then to Anthony, and then we will come to Brian and Helen on the points. So do you want to comment briefly on Holly's point, Stephen?
Yeah, first of all, thank you, Holly. You spoke very from the heart, and I absolutely love that. Just in regards to CE schemes, the thing that was a problem for me personally was the flexibility. While I was working there was one staff member who was doing everything, so that would take them the full 8 hours. So I can fully understand that part. However, when it became the two of us, it was a much lighter workload. So it was like, 6 hours and everything was done, including final cleanup and everything. That just left us basically twiddling our thumbs for 2 hours. That was torturous for someone like me with ADHD.
Okay.
Secondary thing that I wanted to mention about is actually something regarding applying for jobs. In the past, I have applied for jobs online, and due to computer systems, and I know this is going to sound stupid, some places have a system that will check a CV that is sent to them online. If they see any problem words, for example, the word disability, they automatically will send you a rejection letter. And in fact, one in particular rejection letter I got said, we do not have the supports to accompany, to facilitate someone like you. However, in my CV, I had also mentioned, I do not require any additional supports. Like, I don't need someone standing over my shoulder. That was a big red flag in terms of annoyance for me.
Okay. Denta? Denta, do you want to comment on Holly's points?
Yeah, like have people who are working in business have like training where they can talk to people with disability. Like I went into an interview and the person looked at my staff member and then they looked at me and asked me what age it was. I kind of felt uncomfortable, which I kind of think they should be doing the training that we do, like for a course. I think someone like a manager, they should have their team doing a training course so they can learn to, like, from us, they can actually know what, if we have anything wrong, like say if you go for a job, they can actually know there's a person coming in with disability so that we have like a link support. If we ever get nervous or we feel like there's something wrong, we can have something to lean on. Because like I went to a job and I felt so uncomfortable. I did it for one day. I actually told them I won't be back because I got so nervous and I felt like there wasn't support till I went back to my college and said, no, it's not for me. So I think they should have a background where they can have someone to link on.
Janine? Anthony, do you want to comment on Holly's points?
Oh, sorry. What was Holly's point? Sorry, I couldn't hear it.
I suppose the main point that you have, and I think it's coming across very strong at the meeting, is the getting in, what are the barriers to employment, and a fear and a dread of losing entitlements, I think is what's coming across very strongly, benefits and stuff. Maybe you might comment on that.
Yeah, because if a disability does full-time work, they lose half of their DA. It is. Yeah, I know in some terms it's you get more from the team, but the problem is you lose the benefits. It's not all about the money. It's the benefits and the titles you had from when you're a disability user, and then when you go to a full-time employment. That's why I don't want a full-time appointment. But the problem is trying to find a part-time work in these days is more harder than ever.
Okay.
And that's what the struggling part is. And plus with having your family, and then if they have illnesses and kind of stuff, you're more independently, you have to look after them and then look after yourself, and then the life changes. It's kind of like more emotional for people to try and find a job. And then if they do find a job, they don't know if the hours are going to be the best or the work environment is going to be titled to the person's needs and looks.
Okay. Helen?
Yeah, there's a lot of things in what people have been saying that, I'd love to debate this all day, but however. The one thing that I know in my job every day probably comes up, and there are two words that come up in conversation or when I'm speaking with my staff every day, and those two words are person-centred. Everything we do is person-centred, and it's in response to what a person actually needs. And that, when it comes to legislation, you're talking about personal budgets. That enables people to make choices about the support they receive. And this isn't just about social farming, and I totally support what William says in that flexibility is key. We become too systemic about our responses to people and too rigid, and actually what we need to be, all of those things can be solved by people having access to their own budget and being able to make choices, and people who know them best and who support and advocate for people, supporting them to make good choices in their life. And that comes with access to a budget. Okay, and that's a word that we use literally every week, almost every day in social farming. I think also perhaps allowing and supporting businesses and communities to create opportunities for people and to value the people that are in their own communities. Finding valued social roles is really important in social farming as well, because that's something that we see a lot. People grow and develop into various roles, not just employment, but often valued roles in their community. So again, that responds to what the person wants. If the person wants paid employment, then they should be supported to pursue that and to achieve that. But those supports can be difficult to find. The other thing that we do in social farming as well is the system needs to be educated as well. So we actually get involved in talks with our third level colleges in Ireland, and we're going in and informing them about social farming and explaining how we can deliver on policy and on what they want to achieve in their careers for the people that they're supporting. So they're just some of the things.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, I think from Pat Buckley's question, certainly one thing would be flexibility in the systems, whether that's certainly personalised budgets in giving people choice in advance of employment, but flexibility in the systems, like you could in the past get your disability payment and the CE payment together. That ended, of course, with the crash. So, I mean, that was, those kind of things were there. They've changed over time. But I think focusing on people and investing in people and allowing flexibility, because, and all our lives change. So for people with disability, you need to invest more, front load, when they're in the education system, when the transition after school into training, further education, and into employment. Because if you have a happy, fulfilled citizen for the vast majority of their life, and then they may need more supports later in life, like us all, you become independent, you become an active contributing citizen. So I think people with disabilities have a right, and the rights-based approach, which you mentioned, Holly, is absolutely the way to go. But you can't have a right if you don't have the flexibility in the budgets to make those choices, to give you the rights. And that's really what the system has been finding it difficult to do. And I suppose when innovation comes along, we have found, you're up against, there's a lot of money, 80 million euros or something going into the disability service provision, but the cost and the value of what that delivers is the key. And when you do we do know that when people get choice, they make good choices for themselves. Not always the perfect choice, but they make choices that are good for them. And so, in here, we still don't have access to that the same as people should. So, and that's flexibility in the systematic arrangements in social welfare payments, in, the system eds, the RT placements. People have no choice but to take the placement they're given, particularly in rural areas as well. Where there's a limit, or maybe no provision. So, and so when somebody gets a choice, they're very innovative themselves. So we believe that flexibility, and that be in the current systems, but also in innovating and allowing them to come in and looking at the real, the real value towards rights-based. So if there was proofing on the delivery for an individual, and investing in people. So certainly the empowering process that happens in social farming, we have documented. We have a number of these reports on our website in the mental health service with people with disabilities, with young people. And so we can see, and we're reporting and researching how individuals change in terms of the way they view life, the choices they're going to make, and how the system, I suppose, can support it with innovation. So I think there is a significant empowering process when people are just seen as citizens as opposed to different, and that's certainly happening on farms.